Your support helps us bring you programs you love. Go to wyomingpbs.org, click on Support, and become a sustaining member or an annual member. It's easy and secure. Thank you.
Let us leave here messengers of the wilderness. Let us help show this too bright, busy, distracted, buried, hurried, harried, unsatisfied, unsatiated world.
Endurance, perseverance, the adventures of Virginia Schmidt. Next on Wyoming Chronicle.
Funding for Wyoming Chronicle is provided in part by the Dragisevich Foundation, supporting the work of the Jackson Hole Historical Society and Museum.
And we're pleased to be welcomed by Virginia Schmidt. Virginia, welcome to Wyoming Chronicle.
Hi.
Our viewers have had an opportunity to see a little bit about the hikes that you have undertaken and your walk of Wyoming, and we'll get a chance to talk more about it now. If I want to get to Jackson from Cody, and if I want to get to Pinedale from Union Pass, and if I want to get to Lander from Pinedale, I'm not sure I would walk.
Right.
Yet you did.
Yes.
Tell us about the reasons why.
Yes. So in August of 2017, my best friend, Jonelle Pollock, and my dog, a poodle pointer, Peter, and I set off from Ishua Trailhead up South Fork to walk roughly 200 miles of Wyoming, eventually ending up in Lander. And the idea started because Jonelle, who I have been close friends with since we were 12 and met at Cody Middle School, we both grew up here in Cody, had done the John Muir Trail in 2016, which is part of the PCT, the Pacific Coast Trail. Mm-hmm. And it's one of her dreams to do the entire CDT, the Continental Divide Trail, which is, so you have the Pacific Coast Trail on the west coast, you have the Appalachian Trail on the east coast, and then up the middle is the Continental Divide, which is much longer than either of those coastal trails. I think it's like 2,500 miles, but it's somewhere around there. So originally the Continental Divide Trail goes through Yellowstone, but as the trip drew closer, we were getting more and more nervous about grizzlies, and we decided to take my dog. Can't take dogs in Yellowstone, so we decided the first leg of our trip would be the thoroughfare.
And had this planning been going on for years, months, days?
No. So as you and I were talking about, a lot of people who go on big treks like this, they have spreadsheets, they have everything down to every last scenario and every last piece of gear, and we're a bit more like, we're really going to do this, and this is how much time we have, and we may not be totally prepared, but we'll go. So we had probably been talking about the possibility for 3 or 4 months, and then about a month, it was at the beginning of, or mid-July that we were like, we're doing it.
And prior to, we'll get into more about the trip, would you classify yourself as an experienced backpacker, moderately experienced, still somewhat of a beginner?
I would classify myself as a moderate to experienced backpacker, definitely a very experienced hiker, thanks to my mom. Thanks, Mom, for inspiring me. But I had never done any kind of through hiking. So like the furthest I had ever backpacked in a day, the longest backpacking trip I had ever gone on was, 5 or 6 days. Furthest I had ever backpacked in a day, like 10 miles.
Another component of this that strikes me is a lot of people train for these adventures.
Yeah.
And again, not just for a month.
Right.
For a long time. Were you worried about your physical fitness, or were you confident that it was going to be okay for you to embark?
So that was something that we felt like was on our side because I had been, one thing, I had been managing my family's barn and around 30 horses for the past year and a half, and that requires just constant manual, bucking hay bales and just a lot of walking, a lot of riding, a lot of exercise, and then we just do a lot of hiking. So we were like, we'll be good physically. And, after that first week, we were definitely in shape.
So it didn't take long.
No.
So give us a sense of those early day routines. You left and you were on your way.
Yeah.
What was your day?
So we would wake up. We didn't wake up terribly early. Jonelle and I, neither of us are super early morning people, but we probably on average would wake up around sometime between 7 and 8 a.m. We would get up.
What waked you?
Oh, what would wake us? I would say just natural light, you know, but we're also both the kind of people that will wake up and go back to sleep easily. Like neither of us have much trouble sleeping. You know, but sometimes like Peter, my dog, rustling around in that little 2-person tent would wake us. Sometimes the sound of something crunching, which you would think was a bear, would wake us. But so we always made sure that we had a surplus of coffee during all 3 weeks.
Some things never change. Is that it?
And that was like our splurge, you know, because if you can only carry so much food, and you can't carry enough food to be full or overnourished when you're going to be in the wilderness for 8 or 9 days and you're averaging 10 miles a day. So it was like, well, if we're hungry and cold, we can always have coffee.
So this whole trip was going to take about a month, but you had broken it up into
3 segments. Right.
You were on your way to Jackson through the thoroughfare.
Right. So our first segment was 65, 70 miles from Cody to Jackson through the thoroughfare on Issawa Trail. Also, I need to give a huge shout out to Wes Allen from Sunlight, who Sunlight Sports in Cody. We really couldn't have done it without him. Sunlight printed us off a special giant map of the thoroughfare, which we brought with us for navigating. And then I also had an app on my phone called Gaia for a GPS. But Wes Allen, who has like a photographic memory of the wilderness and has explored most of Wyoming's wilderness, he sat down with Jonelle and I for probably close to 3 hours and mapped out our entire trip. From this first journal I have, you can see the sections that he broke it down into, and he mapped it all out for us.
How rare is it that 2 women want to try something like this?
Well, we definitely got called out for it. You know, so there's definitely the woman factor, I think. Obviously, that conception is changing, but I think around here, the thoroughfare has pretty legendary status. And you say thoroughfare, and people are like, either you're a hunter who's familiar with it, or it's like, you don't go there. You know, it's the place that the sun doesn't touch or whatever, because there are so many grizzlies.
I mean, right through grizzly managed areas.
Right.
Right in the middle of it all.
Right.
And you saw signs everywhere.
Yes. We saw pretty much countless piles of scat. As I told you earlier, our sort of mantra became, how fresh is that scat, and just stick the hiking pole in it. We each had 1 hiking pole from one of my mom's pairs that she gave us, and as long as the scat wasn't too fresh, you know, we just kept going. And if it was, which there were also times, we just kept going and yelled louder and whistled on our bear whistles louder. And Peter had his bear bell on his collar. We had bear bells.
Peter is your dog.
Peter is my dog. It sounds like a human name, but his name is Peter.
And did you feel you were being watched?
Absolutely.
What was that like?
Yeah. You know, honestly, our whole feeling, and we would always be talking out loud. So oftentimes we would literally be talking to the bears or whatever wildlife we felt was watching us. And we would say, you know, we would yell, we come in peace. We know that this is your land and this is your space. And you don't, you know, see very many people like us just walking through it.
So is this a repetitive speech that just got replayed?
Would ever more become, you know, more detailed and turning into narratives and stories and fairy tales that we would be telling. And so we really felt that if we were diligent about making noise and putting it out there, that we meant well, because we're the intruders, you know, that's where they live. That's not where we live. So.
Before we continue on, did it become easier or more difficult to sleep at night?
Easier.
Because of exhaustion or because of comfort with where you were in the present?
Both, but I would absolutely say like comfort. I mean, that first day, it was like, I remember walking, and I have a cool picture of it, opening that gate that opens into the thoroughfare from Ishwa Trail about a mile in, and I just remember thinking like, what are we doing? Because you can just feel, it's like this electric energy that there's danger, you know? You're not at the top of the food chain anymore, cheesy as that sounds. So after, but then you start to realize like, I think you start to feel more part of it instead of being an intruder. It's like you're part of the ecosystem back there too after a few days.
So you've got a pack. How heavy is your pack?
We never weighed our packs, and that
On purpose?
was, I don't know if it was like, because I don't even have a scale in my house. And we were definitely down to the line with getting ready for everything. I've also been meaning to note we saw 2 otters playing in the Yellowstone yesterday and 2 swans on a giant yellow mossy pond that may or may not have been Bridger Lake, which we never did find yesterday. Instead, we found the border of Yellowstone and crossed from the Teton Wilderness into it for a second, Peter too, rebelliously, even though dogs aren't allowed. This land and this book and this friend and this dog, this whole journey confirms what I've long known in my firebeat heart and restless, reckless, insistent soul, that the mud that makes us is rich with flavor and expression of all kind, that conformity is against the natural truth of being, and that an untamed, chaotic, and impossibly beautiful undercurrent is what lights this all up. One thing that I will for sure say is, if you're here in Wyoming, get into the Wind Rivers, because I had never been to the Winds before, and I grew up in Cody, and a lot of my most majestic memories were for sure of the Wind Rivers. I mean, yes, you're walking, averaging 10 miles a day, and you have places to get, but you also have all day to get there. And Jonelle and I are both, we're both yoga teachers. We're both very into mindfulness. I think that's probably part of the reason we're drawn to through hiking in general. But, Upper and Lower Jean Lakes in the Wind Rivers, Island Lake in the Wind Rivers. I mean, if you can go on a little backpacking trip there, I would just tell you to get there next summer if you can. It's just like waterfalls everywhere and, jagged, steep granite mountains, big clear mountain lakes, like everywhere you look. It's really like a fairy tale kingdom in there. The second week in the Wind Rivers, going from Union Pass, which is between Jackson and DuBois, and we started at Union Pass the second week. So going from Union Pass to Pinedale, that week we saw quite a few people. There are people in there that are climbing Gannett, and
fewer bears.
No bears in the Wind Rivers.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as we got out of the thoroughfare and just even a little bit away from Union Pass and into the steep, rocky terrain of the Winds, we never again saw a single pile of bear scat or tracks of any kind. So that was we were not scared about bears in the Winds, and that second week was just, both the first 2 weeks were Indian summer. It was sunsets and sunrises like you couldn't believe. We're in shorts around the campfire, reading to each other around the campfire.
And talk about that for just a moment. You took one book.
Right.
And you shared that book with each other.
Right. So Jonelle and I we were formerly roommates as well, and something that we like to do with a lot of our friends was read books out loud. And so books are just another heavy thing that you're carrying when weight really matters. So we said, we'll bring one book. And we brought the book Women Who Run with Wolves, which was truly a magical experience to read. So we would read it out loud to each other around the campfire, in our tent. she would read a chapter, I would read a chapter, and the whole book is it's an examination sort of all of these like fables and fairy tales and like the feminine power within them. And so it was very inspiring to have that as like the narrative
Of your trek.
along with our trek. So we started that third week from Elkhart Meadows, and the first couple days, it was just warm, and it was almost, I very specifically remember the first night, it was almost like surreal, like how, and I have some pictures Jonelle took of like the lilies on the still lake, and the light was so golden, and then it started raining, and there was a day that we got caught in a very bad lightning storm out in the middle of exposed prairie trying to get to trees. And there were granite boulders. It's like the worst place that you could be. You're the tallest thing around. There's lightning striking and thunder just clapping without missing any kind of beat right after it. And it's like, seriously, we were so scared of grizzlies. We forgot about lightning. Here we find ourselves in one of those situations. And then we thought, wow, we survived that lightning storm. Like, that was the worst. And that hail that came with it. So we're good now. And then we weren't good because it was the beginning of what turned out to be a storm. I know that our friend who was going to come meet us in the Wind Rivers got a winter storm warning on her phone, knowing that we were just in there socked in. And we ended up going to some very high elevations over Washakie Pass and then Lizard Head Trail. Don't be fooled by that name, because it's not called a pass because it goes on for 5 miles at about 12,000 feet.
Wow.
So we ended up needing to backtrack away from Shadow Lake because if snow to go over that way to Cirque of the Towers. And so we turn around, and it's getting late in the afternoon. Our whole plan was to go over Washakie Pass, before noon, and then we go on the wrong trail and everything is waylaid, and so it's dangerously late in the day because there's storms gathering everywhere. We cross this river and we see a group of 3 guys coming down from having crossed Washakie Pass, and they look like they've seen a ghost. I mean, like, not happy with the experience they just had, and they looked at us like we were crazy, and they're like, "You're going over Washakie Pass?" And we were like, "We have to get to Cirque." And the leader of the group was like, "I would not do that. I wouldn't do that." And I'm like, "Well, we're not going to be able to cross it tomorrow. Like, look at this storm." And he was like, "If you're going to go right now, because our tracks are still there in the storm." And so, oh my gosh, that climb was just interminable. And it was, we had their tracks for a while, but the snow the snow and the wind. And I remember we were praying. I mean, we were praying out loud, like, please, please, wind. Like, please don't come up. Please just like stay calm for us to cross, because with all that loose snow and getting rid of their tracks. So I remember we got up to, it's like, just suddenly rising out of the white blur is this huge wooden sign that says, Washakie Pass, you've reached the top.
Did you feel like you had hit a needle in a haystack? I mean,
Pretty
was that
much.
the thought there?
The feeling was, we made it, we're okay. And then go one step past it and look down the other side, and it's just this huge, like, super steep bowl, like a ski hill of white. And you can't see anything else. So it's like, where do we go down? Like, where do we go down? I mean, this whole thing is a boulder field covered with snow. So actually it was Peter, our dog, who sort of like found the way down, and we just followed him.
Wow.
And so we get to the bottom, and it's, we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we've survived. There's this snowstorm. That was the craziest thing we've ever done. What were we thinking going over Washakie Pass? I'm so glad we're alive. tomorrow, all we have to do is Lizard Head Trail. No big deal. We don't have to go over another pass. We should have looked at the map more closely, however, to look at like all the tiny little squiggly lines over all of Lizard Head Trail, suggesting that it's very high up. But again, it was like, oh, it doesn't say pass, so we're not going over another pass. Well, so the next day was by far the most arduous of the trip, getting over Lizard Head Trail. Basically, we got up wet, cold, it's still snowing. We've cooked in our tent because all bear safety has gone out the window, just like trying to stay warm and survive, and with everything getting wet. We climb, we just start climbing again, and we're like, this seems weird. Like, why are we going uphill so much again? And it's snowing, and it's snowing. And then we get to this sort of like a I guess a saddle, I don't know if that's what you would call it, where we've been climbing more than we thought we were capable of climbing. And there's a sign that goes this way, and we're like, oh, good, it's going to start to go down. And we go look at the sign, and it's for Bear's Ear Trail, which is not where we're going. And then we look over to the right, and there's a sign for Lizard Head Trail that just goes straight up this mountain. And there's there's storms gathering even more ferociously just all around. And so yeah, we ended up basically Lizard Head Trail is a 5-mile trail across the face of a boulder field on the face of a mountain that would be impossible to follow without snow. Mm-hmm. So
give me an idea, Virginia, of your mental state here. Is it just survival? Is it perseverance? Is it adventure? I mean, what is in your mind right here?
So I think a big part of the whole trip was if one of us was down, the other one was up. And during these, it's like either your state of mind is just step, step, step. And at that point, you're the one in the back and Jonelle's leading, like gritting the teeth, like, we got to do this, we got to do this. And then maybe it switches and Jonelle's like, step, step. And I'm like, we got to do this. And I just to quickly finish this part of the story, the two things that saved us on Lizard Head Trail were, one, cairns, so stacks of rocks. And without them, we would have gotten lost and been in big trouble up there. And then the other thing that we see going up this straight up this mountain is these footprints in the snow, like deep footprints, fresh footprints. And we're like, who else would have taken this trail today? Like, this is insane. Those footprints saved our lives, because at that point my GPS had frozen. My phone was frozen. Like, it was done. And there were times we couldn't see the cairns, and we would see the footprints that were like icing out in the snow. We followed them all the way down to Lizard Head Meadows, which is right next to Cirque of the Towers. Followed them all the way to these people's tent, and it was this couple from Alberta who were just like, "We love Wyoming. It's like the foothills of Alberta," and we were like, you are insane.
So
but even they thought it was crazy.
They had hiked up and hiked back.
So they had come, like, I told you there was that part where you could see down to Bear's Ear Trail. Right. They had come up that way from Dickinson State Park and then gone up Lizard Head and into Cirque. But they were our trail saviors. So without those footprints, and then we ended up seeing them again when we got to Lander at the bake shop in Lander, and we were like, you're the ones who saved our lives. So
you made it to Lander.
We made it to Lander. The crazy part was Claire, we figured she wouldn't hike in. She actually did end up hiking in with a friend. We missed each other. Like, she was at Lost Lake by Cirque. We were in Lizard Head Meadows, and we never saw each other. And then Jonelle and I ended up, instead of going over Jackass Pass and out Big Sandy like we planned, to avoid another pass after our Lizard Head experience, we went an extra 10 miles and got out at Worthen Meadows, and eventually, through a forest ranger, got word to Claire to come pick us up, and stayed with her in Lander, and our moms came and picked us up, took us out to dinner at, what's it called, Cowfish? Mm-hmm. Is that yeah. Cowfish.
And you look back and you accomplished.
One of the coolest things about this is one of my best friends, Jessica Williams, here in town. She was really worried about us doing this trip because of the bears, mostly, among other threats. And she thought we were crazy for doing it. And when we came back and, we're able to tell her we went through the thoroughfare, we did this year, she was like, I want you to take me through the thoroughfare. And just having that feeling of and Jess is someone who I look up to and I admire, and having another woman in my life, especially one who I admire, be inspired that she could do something sort of that adventurous, also dangerous, and prove that to herself, and want me to go with her and do that, that was that made it all worth it. If that's the kind of message that's sending,
And you have more bucket list hikes.
Yes, I have many, many bucket list hikes. So yeah, and then that was my first through hike, and then just 6 months later, I did the Camino de Santiago across northern Spain, which was 500 miles. And so now there's nothing that's like through hiking as far as peace of mind, and there's nothing like walking all day to lighten your heart and clear your head. Yeah, that's...
So Virginia, as we start to close, you have shared with us some of your writing that's very important to you. Do you see yourself continuing to write? Is that something that interests you to become better, and is that fulfilling to you to write?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. A big part of Johnelle and I doing this trip was to employ ourselves as storytellers. And Johnelle is a phenomenal photographer. I am a writer. She also writes. I also take photographs. And if I could, document adventure and landscape all around the world and share those stories, that's the dream. So.
Well, we give you our best wishes. I'm glad I bumped into you. Your story is one of adventure.
Yes.
It really is. And I think it's wonderful that two women embarked on this journey. And we're in the end, very successful, and you're not finished.
No, it's hopefully only just begun.
Congratulations.
So,
Thank you, Virginia, so much for joining us.
Nice
on Wyoming
to talk
Chronicle.
to you. Thank you.